Both the supply of and interest in trucking jobs has seen a decline. It's predicted that trucking conditions will remain largely neutral until the first part of 2025, and cargo theft continues to be a thorn in the side of trucking companies. Plus, we'll dig into what Jason Miller has to say on his latest take for the economy. All that and more on today's show. For Randall Reilly, I'm Joshua Miller, and this is the 30-Day Reset. Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the 30-Day Reset. We're here every month with updated recruiting and freight data, a news story, and an economic update from our good friend and Michigan State's own, Jason Miller. If that sounds useful to you, don't forget to like, share, and comment for our YouTube channel, or you can sign up for a sampling of our latest written and video content with our monthly newsletter if you happen to be over on the Randall Reilly site. And remember, everything we cover on today's show and even more in-depth data and charts are available in our 30-Day Reset download. That's totally free, and it's available to you down in the comments if you're over on YouTube, or just down below the video player on the Randall Reilly site. Alrighty, now that that's out of the way, let's get right to it. First up, it's Trucking by the Numbers, brought to you by Stratus Strategize. The trucking job supply and interest in trucking jobs has started to drop. Active jobs for truck drivers over on Indeed fell by 11% since August, and the number of jobs and the number of posting companies both hit their lowest levels since June of 2020. Those aren't the only declines though, as driving job seekers fell 12% from August, and Google searches for truck driving jobs fell by 9%, hitting its lowest level since March. Over on the cost side of things, lead and hire costs are still looking pretty favorable from a carrier standpoint. The average company driver CPL is down 3% through the first half of October and is on track to hit its second most favorable level since April of 2020. And the average company driver CPH fell by 17% in September, which is its best level since August of 2020. In the world of freight, FTR is still projecting trucking conditions to remain mostly neutral for the rest of the year and into 2025. They are hoping for some positive developments in Q2 of 2025, but it should be noted that those predictions are dependent on more interest rate cuts to help jumpstart investment into the manufacturing sector. If those cuts do not occur, it's likely that manufacturing demand, which has a disproportionately large impact on trucking, won't increase enough to meaningfully shift trucking volumes and conditions. As far as freight numbers go, according to the FTR data, the total load activity was up by 10% year over year as spot rates inched up 1% year over year. Dry van saw a dip of 10% in load volume, but a 3% rise in spot rates year over year. Refrigerated loads were up 7% year over year, with the rates increasing by 1% compared to last year, and flatbed spot rates were basically flat year over year, but the load volume spiked by 32% compared to the same week of last year. You can refer to this month's download for a little more detail, including comparisons to the 5-year averages and access to all the charts and slides for the recruiting and driver trend data. Now, let's dig into this month's news story. A major problem trucking has been forced to deal with as of late is a sharp increase in cargo theft, and unfortunately, it is likely to remain an issue through the rest of 2024. The monthly theft report from Overhaul, a cargo protection and tracking services provider based out of Texas, reveals that in September, theft levels were higher than those of July and August, and there was also a significant number of thefts involving armed assailants and violence against drivers in North Carolina and Maryland. Other key findings from the Overhaul theft report include 63% of cargo thefts took place in the period from Tuesday to Thursday, and hotspots for September cargo theft were Southern California, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Kansas City. Electronics were the most frequently targeted product type, and the most common cargo theft method was targeting and stealing from unattended shipments parked at warehouses, distribution centers, and delivery destinations. For more on this, you can read the story as it was covered by Truckers News. Link is included below and in this month's download. Now let's check in with Jason Miller for his latest take on the economy.
Welcome everyone to our next freight market update as we're looking at, wrapping up the last couple months here of 2024. As we start, we just recently had, some of the big public LTL and truckload carriers releasing their financials. And Q3 still was soft. That doesn't surprise me when we look at trucking demand as measured by the ton-mile index that my colleague Yem Boyamole at the University of Tennessee and I co-author. Right now, we're seeing sort of through this year is just seasonally adjusted trucking demand moving along the bottom of a trough without anything really to sort of spike it upwards. And so that's really what we're waiting for right now, is this big spike in demand. No. A lot of folks thought that the major hurricanes that hit in October and late September would really change the freight market. But consistent with what I've been talking about for several months, hurricanes tend not to have the big impact on the market cycle that folks tend to think, especially if they occur in down markets. That's based off of some research led by Travis Kolpa at Grand Valley State. And we can see this here looking at DAT's contract rates that they report as well as spot rates. You'll see a big spread exists between those two, and the premium right now that contract is getting over spot in their data is still very pronounced and well above this 10% threshold that has tended to signal a shift from a, let's say, shipper market to a carrier market if we drop below that. And then what I lastly want to talk about is, I've been fairly pessimistic on how quick the market cycle for dry van truckload can truly change. And my prediction has been the earliest we could see a meaningful shift would be Q1 of 2025, late Q1 into early Q2 2025. So we're still 4 to 5-ish months away in a best case scenario. And one of the reasons for that is one index that I track closely. This is sort of one that I don't publicly talk about too much. It's kind of part my hidden ingredient, but is looking at capacity utilization in U.S. manufacturing. And we see very clear patterns over time that when capacity utilization starts to increase rapidly, that tends to correspond to a bull market cycle for dry van truckload carriers. We see that in 2024. We see that in 2017 in sort of normal economic times. Equally, if we start to see capacity utilization rates drop, that tends to signal that we're about to enter a bearish market cycle. Data through Q3 from the Federal Reserve Board, we're still trending down right now on capacity utilization. And an important pattern you see in these data, barring some type of major environmental shock like a polar vortex, you never see a situation where you go from declining utilization to sharply increasing utilization from one quarter to the next. At best, you decline, you bottom, and then you start climbing up. Given that pattern, the soonest we're going to start to see an increase would be Q1 2025, which would be corresponding to what I'm saying is the first feasible period where we actually see a true change in market conditions kick in. So as I'm expecting moving through the rest of the year, sure, we'll see the usual holiday tightening. We always normally get that. But then you can expect come January, the market will loosen up. And then maybe we start to see some actual meaningful tightening start taking place around March that could bode well for the carrier community. So with that, that wraps up this month's update.
Thank you, Jason. We appreciate your time and expert analysis. Now, if you want to take a closer look at any of the charts and data Jason discussed throughout his update, it is available in this month's download link below. Well, that just about does it for us here on this episode of the 30-Day Reset. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.